do not necessarily reflect the opinion of the hosts, sponsors, or affiliates of the Sasquatch Experience. As always, listener discretion is advised.
911, what are you reporting?
We got someone or something crawling around out here.
Does a legend walk among us, lurking in the forests of our world?
Did you see what it was? Was it a person or an animal or?
I can't tell. All I know is that my sensor light came on and I just happened to glimpse and see this thing running across the yard. A good-sized man or something. It looks like a man. I don't know what it was.
For over 15 years, we've talked with scientists, researchers, investigators, and witnesses, trying to gain insight and proof around the existence of this mysterious entity.
Jesus Christ, you better... Gio!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh. Okay, hang on.
He's right...
Is he in your yard, sir?
Yeah, God, he's big.
Okay, what's he doing in your yard?
He's looking at me.
Join us as we continue into the investigation of the Sasquatch Experience. Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome, Sasquatch Experience, Monday, March 28th, 2022. I'm Sean, the Fort Chop Forker. There's Henry May, James, the Bake Shop Baker, and Vance Nesbitt joining you tonight as we talk about Bigfoot in the Big Sky State. Big Sky, Bigfoot, guys. How the hell you doing tonight, gentlemen?
Doing well, thank you.
Oh, doing good.
A very happy birthday to our co-host with the most, Henry May there. Henry, happy birthday, my friend. How
Thank
young
you.
are you this year?
52.
52. Good God almighty, 52.
Oh, Lordy, you old man.
Well, you're running out of time.
Old
for
man
that
of the
fifth,
Squatch.
So we got to get get that going. Folks, tonight
you
we're going to have
a
a...
day older than 51, so I'm sorry. You just don't.
Yeah, well, yeah, time's been good to you, Henry.
Yeah, we got
That's
to
for
get
sure.
you fifth before the first one doesn't work.
While we didn't launch our pre-show tonight, James Baker did a Dr. Squatch unboxing for us, so you all missed his impeccable knife skills. So we apologize for that technical snafu, and you guys all missed the very interesting stories of how James Baker likes the square bars of soap because they don't get lost in the
Crevices.
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 So there you are.
Bass.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. It's a square bar for a round ass. Ladies and gentlemen, Sasquatch Experience. Why you tune in, I don't know, but we're awfully glad you do. We got some great shows lined up. We've had some good shows. Last week we were off, of course, but we put a replay of Sasquatch Experience Classic with Ranger Tim Cassidy, who was one of the first guests on this show back in 2006. And it's a good show to listen to if you get a chance to go back. And Henry, I think the one thing that amazes me is the fact that over the years some of our opinions have changed on the research.
Yeah.
You know, I was very anti-habituation and I think a little young and arrogant, and now I find the concept, though I don't think I believe in habituation in the sense that it's portrayed, I do think that there is something to it. And I think you guys know what I'm saying by that. I still stand by the fact it's not going to knock on your back door and ask for garlic. It's not going to stand and pose for that Kodak picture. But it's still, does it cohabitate in the same space as some people? And the answer to me is I think so. You got opportunity. You have food source. The list goes on. It's just interesting to think about, in this over 26 years I've been in this, how your thoughts change. And that's okay, because that means you're growing and that means you're learning.
No, that's true. And habituation, I've had personal experiences, living here where a couple of ducks showed up. And when they would show up, they usually showed up at the same time on the patio every day. and I'd throw bread out there or whatever kind of food. And then it became to the point where they would actually peck the beak on the window when they would show up looking for their food, because it became a normal, a normal routine for them, I guess.
Yeah.
Is the
Delivery
word.
service.
So, maybe there's something to it, but I'm not too sure that that's such a good idea with a creature of unknown origin.
Well, they ask you not to do it with bears, and if you have a bear frequenting your house, you take away your deer feeders, you lock your cans up, because it does become a potential danger, not just to you, but also neighbors if you have them, any animals you have on the premises. It becomes a dangerous interaction, and then one has to assume that, perhaps it wouldn't be that different with a Sasquatch.
No, I would think
Well, I
so.
mean, if you take your duck analogy, I frequent Lowe's, constantly, and there is a sandwich shop right in front. Well, in the morning, she takes the moldy bread or the bread from yesterday, and she feeds the ducks, and they're waiting in a little line for her. And
Right.
with habituation, the thing is like you said, it's not going to stop in and say, "How are you doing, Bob?" and have coffee with you and whatever. But eventually, you're in their domain, and they recognize you're not going anywhere, so they might as well be like, "Okay, this is my neighbor Bob.
Right.
I'm going to deal with them, but I'm not going to try to scare them away because that's clearly not going to work."
No, very good point.
It is a good point. But I think it's something that, we consider. And I'm only talking about this because I've started the process of writing the book this weekend. And Vance, more than anybody what a process this has been for me. I could have written it 4 times already if I could be happy with it and not just hit delete.
Right.
But I really think this trip I'm going down is wonderful. And I really feel connected to the work I'm doing. And in doing that, I feel that the reader is going to get something a little different that you don't expect out of most Bigfoot books. A little humor. Right. Maybe it's a little memoir style. I don't know. But it's about, it's called The Elusive Truth, Sasquatch Experiences. And it's about, kind of my beginnings into Bigfoot and some of the cases I've investigated over the years. And, of course, you guys will be featured in it. I couldn't do this book without James Baker being featured in it quite a bit. And, of course, Henry and Vance yourselves. So it's going to be interesting, and I'm really excited. And as I'm going through this process, the memories that just pop up and, just moments that you forgot about of things that happened, oh shit moments and wow, that was really interesting. And I can't believe I said that, or I can't believe we did that moments. They'll all make it into the book. So hopefully I'll have it done by the end of summer.
The time me and Forker almost died trying to get him some.
Yeah, let's not finish
so
that.
It'll be
all
a
right.
comic book, in other words. Okay.
Well, why not? Guys, we came on here to talk about Bigfoot in Montana and just some interesting facts on the state of Montana. Montana has a large population of grizzly bears, Vance. It's probably why the grizzly bear is the state animal of Montana. Mm-hmm. And they say there's an estimated 1,800 grizzly bears thought to be alive today in the state of Montana.
Right.
Now,
Which, when you think about it, is not that big of a number.
It's not, but think about this. Of Montana's 56 counties, Vance, 46 counties have an average population of just 6 people or less per square mile.
True. Very true.
So now you put that in perspective to the grizzly bears, right?
Yeah.
And that starts becoming a little, now probably not exact, and someone's going to do the math and they're going to say, "You Forker, you idiot." But, you put that in the same context as grizzly bears, and, that is a lot of bears for that state.
That's true.
In comparison to, where they frequent in other states.
Right. And, I was doing a little bit of research. Didn't mean to step on your toe. I was doing a little bit of research prior to this show. And one interesting thing that came up about Montana is since the last census came out, there's been a big influx of population that has moved to Montana. Yeah. So now you have more people in these rural areas that get to witness a little bit more, whether it's just nature itself as known or oddities in nature of high strangeness. And Again, I always go back to the fact that not everybody reports what it is that they see. They don't. It's just something that either freaks them out and they're, unsettled with it, and they don't know where to go with it unless they happen to just stumble across something like Sasquatch Experience or the BFRO or, Sasquatch Chronicles, and will at least share their story. But I find it interesting that states like Texas and Florida and Montana and even Idaho, which borders Montana, those populations are increasing with people moving out of high taxation areas or areas in which they're uncomfortable in. And now they're moving into smaller cities or smaller townships. And those are expanding. And when you bring more people in, more people see things.
Moving away from places they're just going to turn these places into in 10 years anyway.
Well,
So,
I hope not.
that's
not the
that's
case.
just the reality of it.
Don't bring your baggage there.
Don't. That's right. I'm very much against that. By the way, people. Not that
I am too.
I'm against people moving, but if you're
Right.
going to move to an area, adapt to the area. Don't adapt the area to you.
Right.
That's the problem. And then, as you say, it does increase the interaction between animal and person. And suit you up for people that aren't suited to be living in these places to have more accidents. You're going to see more frequency of missing people, more frequency of animal attacks, just because these folks have no freaking clue what they're doing in these frontier areas, because they still are very much a frontier.
Well,
Oh, yes.
and you make a valid point, because the fact is Montana is also part of the Homestead Act. So a lot of times they're getting this land, off the grid, or they're preppers, and they're getting this land out of nowhere for like cheap.
Oh,
and
yeah.
they think they're building up basically little shanty towns and stuff like that, or they're building houses like.
He's got a thing for shanty towns tonight.
Well, what it would cost in let's say in Florida would be $400,000 for a house. They can get 20 acres and put a cabin on and live off the grid for 100.
Right.
Folks, join us in Montana as we form Bakerville,
Right.
which is going to be our own shanty town in the middle of the Big Sky country.
I'll bring the pallets to build the walls with.
Oh my God, you know it.
But as we talk about animal interactions, and we go back to the grizzly bear, right? Oftentimes we correlate grizzly bear or bears in general into areas where there could be potential Bigfoot activity. And I think mainly because diets would have to be very similar between these creatures to sustain them. I mean, it's the only other large mammal that lives in those woods that, that would need the same type of diet and shelter to survive on a consistent basis. And so I guess when we talk about bears, it really kind of brings it back home to Bigfoot, and there's some correlations that can be made. As James and we went to Creature Weekend one year, James, and you remember this, and we sat through a presentation by Dr. John Mayenzinski. And we actually learned so much about bears from sitting through that presentation. And, of course, he was out there to study the bighorn sheep and, real known animals, but he had an encounter of his own out in the western states. I don't remember if it was Montana or Wyoming exactly. It skips my mind at the moment. But an interaction he had that lent him to believe that Bigfoot was real. And when you sit there and listen to a guy like John Mayenzinski talk about, just his experience that he has, studying bear and the bighorn sheep, and then he lends credibility to the fact that, hey, I had this encounter with Bigfoot or something. I believe this is what it is. Those are the stories and those are the interactions that make me perk up a little bit and pay more attention. And as we roll that into what we do, you start again. We all this is about putting together a profile and a piece, right? And the behaviors make sense. The dietary needs make sense. At some point, we got to find something that's going to, kind of blow the lid off this proof negative and have something proof positive.
Right.
Not to go off on the tangent there.
No. But I sent you a graphic of, Montana ranks 5th in Bigfoot sightings per capita. And I go back to my whole point with the census, and more people are moving there. So there'll probably be more sightings in the next 10 years when the next census comes out and we get, per capita come back on sightings. But, look, it borders Canada. I've been through Montana a couple of times, and just my personal opinion, Colorado is a beautiful state as far as the mountains go. I don't think that Colorado can hold a candle to Montana as far as the wilderness mountains, and it is an extremely rough terrain. And within Montana itself, a lot of the routes that take you through there for your vehicles, you're up in the mountains, and you actually get to see what the terrain is like. It's very hostile. It's very hostile as far as how the terrain is. Yes, something could be there. Yes, there could be a Bigfoot there. I know you'd have to zoom in on it, and I believe that Montana has had 52 sightings.
Yeah, 52 is what it says in advance.
Within the last report. Now, you slide over to the east, and even if you go to Illinois, it's 296. But that's per capita.
Yeah,
which is
and you have
a little different number, but
that's a good point that you make, that per capita number. And this is all I think it's just going to, I think it's just pulling from the BFRO, and it is BFRO,
right.
Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization. If you go to a state like Pennsylvania, and I only know that because that's where I reside, there's probably over 500 reports of Bigfoot sightings.
Oh, sure.
There's just 118
the
of them.
Population centers are so much higher than out in Montana.
Well, yeah, but they're also condensed into areas around the 2 or 3 big major cities. Probably 5 major cities in Pennsylvania. And regions that make the population, but there's a vast amount of the state, just like Montana, that's left to the wilderness, very rural, Right. But Montana's a little bit more extreme just because of that, per capita 6 people, per square mile in 46 of the counties in Montana. That's significant, right?
Right.
That's a significant number.
But if you take a look at the terrain, or if you've ever been through there, you can understand why.
Because, yeah, absolutely.
There are such mountains, in just sheer granite cliffs and of course, you don't have a grocery store 10 minutes down the road from you. You're talking, we're gonna have to allow at least 2 hours to get into town just to buy some eggs and milk and sustain staples.
But that's the price you pay to live out there.
Oh,
right?
sure it
and
is.
you know
Absolutely.
that know that going into it, and it's really now like we talk about Bigfoot sightings. BFRO said what was it 52 sightings?
56.
When that was 56 when that was updated last
52. You're correct. Yes.
It was updated in August 30th, 2021. So there's probably been a couple sightings that have popped in between now and then. It doesn't seem like a lot.
Right.
And then if you look into that, there's 2 counties that really make up the bulk of the sightings. And that's, I think it's Missoula County, which has 9, and Lewis and Clark County, which has 8. So there's 17 sightings out of the 2 counties out of 56. Those areas tend to be a little bit more probably frequented by people. Now, Lewis and Clark County, I think Missoula also gets pretty much closer to the Idaho border.
Yes. Correct.
Than it does
Southern
to the other,
Idaho,
So, I mean, probably where they connect to states with more population centers, higher, probably better maintained roads, I might say. So it does make sense that those areas are also higher frequented. Probably also have more of like the state or national parks in that area too.
Right, but does it make sense to anybody here that if you're in such a rural area and you have an encounter with something unknown origin, even if it's a UFO or Bigfoot or any other cryptid creature, when you're in such a rural area, you don't have that immediate access to reach out and make a report. You may just take that home and lock your doors and, maybe talk with your neighbors that live 3 miles down the road about it. But, I think there's probably a lot more, encounters than are actually, just because it says 52 for Montana, that's not the number. I'm sure there's plenty more that are not being reported.
No, and we have to make that apparent too, because you fall into the same problem in Montana as you do in the northern central part of Pennsylvania. More rural people, people that grew up hunting, hiking, fishing, people that are very outdoors oriented, and these folks are not going to be the ones to go out and tell somebody they had a sighting with something they can't explain because of fear of ridicule or because it just doesn't fit into their, their normalcy. Like they're very conservative parts of the state. And in those very conservative parts, if you can't kill it, it doesn't exist.
Well, there's also a third option. They may not be reporting it for the simple fact is they don't want 44,000 people tromping on their yard. Yeah. They went out there to be alone. They didn't go. So they saw something and they might've wanted to, they have phones, they have whatever. I mean, they might have wanted to report it the minute afterwards, but then sat down a minute and goes, okay, but now I'm going to have 1,000 people showing up at my house randomly.
I think you overestimate the interest of people actually looking for Bigfoot.
I get his
in
point.
their mind, though, 30 people is still more than they want to deal with.
But I also don't think that's true either, because you're also living in a state where if you go on someone's property and you get caught, you're going to have holes blasted in your ass.
Yeah. Right.
And I don't think it's that they don't want people around. I think it goes back to, again, the point I made where folks they weren't going to talk about it naturally anyhow to somebody, even if they saw it, because now all of a sudden I'm seeing these things on my property. People are going to think I'm crazy.
Right.
Plus, if you don't, if you're out there and you don't talk to a lot of people or whatever, you don't have people where does that come up in conversation?
Yeah, you're not going to go down to Floyd's barbershop and say, "Hey guys, out in the yard the other day, I saw a Yeti walking through my field, and it jumped over my fence."
Right.
Gus.
No.
It's just like this.
And still, even though Bigfoot is a huge part of this culture right now, there's still
pop culture.
A large number of people that are just unfamiliar with this. They're unfamiliar with this community. They don't know what to do with it, and nor do they feel a compulsion. A lot of people don't feel a compulsion to have to do something about it by reporting it to BFRO. They're just completely unaware.
I think individuals that are unaware about this, Vance, individuals unaware about this are only unaware of it because that it's been made a mockery of for the last 30 years in commercials, fantasy, and folklore. They're not used to this being taken as an applicable science where people are actually using research tools and methodologies to go and actually pay real attention to this subject. It's for some of us, it has escalated beyond fantasy and folklore and into reality and a science of discovery. And it has moved past the, comic book, Harry and the Henderson-esque kind of slapstick. And that in itself, I think is now that you have shows like, again, here we go with the Finding Bigfoot and Expedition Bigfoot, as much as this last season's been a lot of very exciting camera cuts, it adds a little bit of credibility to a field and gives people insight into what's going on out there. That it's no longer just guys going out with axe handles beating on trees to make some noise. Like there's actual real science going into this. Now that folks are starting to realize that, Vance, maybe we can start peeling back some of those layers of the onion and getting people to start reporting this. Like, hey, these are actual legitimate researchers. I've seen something. I'm going to tell them.
Right.
Yeah, those shows would bring up the conversation because,
Right.
It's always good to start the conversation. And I'm okay with that. But it's where you take the conversation that makes it important. And if you're not going to do it justice by, having an educated conversation about it, I can't tell you how many times I have a conversation with somebody about Bigfoot and the first stupid question out of their mouth is there more than one? Well, it took, unless you were asexually reproduced, it took more than one to create you.
Yeah, no,
You're
I'm
guilty of asking that
guilty
stupid
of
question.
Look, back in the early 1990s, my ex-brother-in-law, who is not part of this whole thing, it's just was not part of his personality or at all. And we would hang out, and this was going on for years. And one day he went down to Southern Illinois to visit his brother, my other ex-brother-in-law, and on his way home. And the way he said it to me in the car was, I saw a Bigfoot running along the side of the road. I wasn't part of this community back then. I'm like, what? He's like, this thing was huge and it was hair covered and it was running along the side of the road while I'm driving. I don't know but it was a Bigfoot. I'm like, okay, dude. Yeah, in Illinois, sure. I was so skeptical and I just kind of brushed it off. Now I look back on it and I'm like, boy, I wish I could have dove into that whole conversation a little bit more to find out. So yeah, there's a lot of that goes on. And as time goes on, more and more people that are skeptical start to come around a little bit, because of some of the facts and evidence that comes forth. They start to think and, double check what their whole idea is behind all of this.
Well, you think Illinois, Vance, you don't, you start going into Chicago, right? You don't start thinking about
I know so many
rural areas.
Illinois is Chicago, right? Yeah.
It happens with Pennsylvania where you think it's either
Right,
Philly
right.
or Pittsburgh, right? There's
Right.
and it happens. Like, so, don't
I
necessarily feel
understand.
bad about
Right.
that. Not that I'm trying to turn this into a therapy session for you, but in these
need it.
situations, it happens, right? These stupid questions, and it takes away from the longer you entertain it, the more it takes away from your opportunity to have critical conversation around it.
Right.
Right. And look, I hear about
feel
it all the
guilty
time.
about that, right? No, I do feel guilty about it because had I, not been so close-minded at the time, like I said, this is back in the early '90s, even before Sasquatch Experience even came on the scene. I just kind of brush it off as okay, maybe he smoked a little too much and on his way home, and maybe it was a dude in a fur coat. I don't know what to think of, but I just kind of brushed it off. Now I would love to dive into that whole conversation as to exactly what he saw, because look, how many people have seen a Sasquatch running along the side of the road while they're driving?
I
that's
wonder
a
how
common
boring
thing.
it must be to be a fixed-minded person.
Yeah.
To not have anything excite you in
Right.
life or,
Right.
give you that thrill of adventure. If we relied on discovery based upon the whims of people with a fixed mindset, the world would still be flat.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, we'd all be living in a hut. No,
That's
agree.
right.
Yeah.
How about
I
it?
totally
But let's
agree.
get back to, what we talked about. Big Sky Bigfoot here. So the last report from the BFRO was April 2020 in Mineral County. A sighting by a trucker on Highway 90 at Lookout Pass outside Tammany, right? So he's an on-the-road truck driver. It was about 4:30 a.m., 4:30 in the morning near Tammany, Montana, near Lookout Pass. Had a very good look at a long, reddish-haired Bigfoot standing up right on the backside of a concrete barrier. Couldn't get a height since it was on the other side of the barrier. Saw the head and both arms on the barrier. Have very bright headlights on the truck, so I got a good look. I'm an avid hunter and outdoorsman. It did not have a pointy face, so probably trying to rule out a bear. Its eyes pointed forward. Saw it for about 5 to 10 seconds. It moved to my left extremely fast, and it was gone. 4:30 in the morning, right? Kind of fits that profile. Highway
Right.
sighting, not atypical. But, I think one could get a estimate of its height if they stopped to look at one, you measured the concrete barrier, and two, you saw the
Right.
road on the other side of the concrete barrier.
Right.
So you could make a height assumption on that.
And if you take into any account of the seconds, what was it, 8 to 10 seconds?
5 to 10.
That 5 to 10 seconds. Okay, even at 5 seconds, that's quite a while. It doesn't sound like a lot, but if you count out 5 seconds in your head, you can absorb a lot of information by what you're looking at. 10 seconds, you can double that. You just take a look at your watch and count out 8 seconds. Split the difference.
I just did that, and in that moment I stopped talking to you was 10 seconds.
Yeah, there you go.
Seems a lot longer than it should be,
does
right?
seem a lot longer. You can absorb a lot of information by what you're looking at in that amount of time. So even though
Because
it
when
doesn't sound
you're-
like a lot, it is quite a bit.
Yeah, it's amazing to think about that. Just if, as a point of perspective, because
Right.
even myself as an investigator, I'm like, man, how much detail they get in 5 to 10 seconds.
Oh,
It moves so fast. It was actually probably out of your sight in 3 seconds. So you probably got really 3 seconds of looking at it and 3 seconds of it running
Yeah,
off.
I mean, it's still pretty amazing,
Right.
though.
But you
It's
still
still
get a
pretty
pretty
amazing.
good snapshot in 3
Right.
seconds. But now
Right.
the next question goes, did you really see what you saw, or did the mind start putting in the mind start putting in the filling in the pieces? Folks, we
Right,
got to take a
right.
break already. Can't believe this. We're going to go to the news. Stranger than fiction
Ew.
news. And we come back, we'll get into more Montana sightings. Stay tuned, folks. We'll be back right after this.
Are ya ready, kids?
Whoa, you can't do that. That's copyright infringements.
But I need helps to remove the barnacles from me arse.
With kids? Here, try this.
Pine tar.
It's Dr. Squatch soap, guaranteed to make you clean and fresh.
And me peg leg, make it shiny and smooth.
Well, not necessarily, but it will smell amazing.
A few moments later. Me feel like I've been scoured fresh by an angel, but tastes terrible on me few teeths.
Well, not really recommended for brushing your teeth with, but now you can buy your own Dr. Squatch soap and shampoos by visiting their website and use promo code DSQEXP for 20% off $20 or more.
Can me stick me hand in her booty for 20 pieces in gold?
No. Use $20 from your own booty. Just use promo code DSQEXP.
And now what about me scurvy?
Here, have some juice. Dr. Squatch soaps and shampoos. Square shape that feels great. Sound check. Microphone on. Coffee cup half full. Bell dings. And the thong underwear are not riding up too high. This is the Sasquatch Experience, stranger than fiction news and stories. Let's get into page 1. Florida man story out of Lithia, Florida. A 59-year-old man died last Thursday morning after he hit an 11-foot alligator on Balm Picnic Road, according to the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. The crash happened around 12:30 a.m. about 2 miles west of County Road 39 on Balm Picnic Road, also known as County Road 672. Is that descriptive enough? Wow. The impact with the alligator caused the vehicle to veer off the roadway and flip before settling into a ditch on the north side of the road, probably where there were many more alligators. I added that. The driver, John Hopkins of Lithia, was pronounced dead at the scene. The alligator also died. Deputies responded to the crash after another driver passed the wreckage and called 911. I'm sure Mr. John Hopkins was a nice man, but in irony, there is a hospital named John Hopkins. Strange. Anyway, if he wasn't a nice man, please reach out to Sean Forker at the Sasquatch Experience, or forever hold your peace. Page 2. Notice you don't hear me flipping pages because I'm actually reading off a screen. Out of London, there's a 25-foot tall sculpture of a shark crashing through the roof of Magnus Hansen's Haynes house. Wow, that's a mouthful. Magnus Hansen Haynes house in rural Oxford, England, is now a happily protected landmark, and he's not happy about it. Hansenheim loves the installation erected by his father and a local sculptor back in 1986 as an anti-war, anti-nuke protest that still remains relevant now as bombs fall on Ukraine and Vlad the Impaler Putin rattles his nuclear weapons. But he says the Oxford City Council ignored his father's other messages this week when it designated the structure a heritage site that makes a special contribution to the community. Bill Hain installed the shark without the approval of local officials, but he didn't think they should have the right to decide what art people see, and the council spent years trying to remove the sculpture. Using the planning apparatus to preserve historical symbols of planning, law defiance is absurd on the face of it. Hanson Hain, a quantum chemist, said this in an interview with the Associated Press. This thing is kind of unusual and is quite a sight to see when driving by, because it looks like a great white shark with just the nose of it piercing through the roof of the house. Quite unusual. That wraps it up for this edition of the Sasquatch Experience Stranger Than Fiction News. And now let's get back to Montana.
And we're back. That was a good attempt this week, Vance. Good attempt.
They do make toothpaste.
Yeah.
How do I scrape the barnacles off me arse?
That's what got Henry intrigued. And folks, DSQ EXP, 20% off, $20 orders for new customers. Not a bad idea. And that's new customers, not nude customers, though you will be a nude customer when you're using Dr. Squatch soap.
If you're using it correctly, yes.
If you're using it correctly.
If
Also,
you got an itchy crotch.
and there he goes. I think he needs the Dr. Squatch jock spray.
Ew.
Aye.
Oh, that just ruined. No, we just lost all our listeners. There they go, running out the
I'm
door.
sure Baker repeating itchy crotch didn't have anything to do with that. Patreon.com/Sasquatch Experience starts for as little as $2 a month. You could support the experience and help us keep this show going with some great content. Have a couple more watch-alongs that are going to be popping in for our Patreons and some good stuff coming your way later in the month. Folks, we are talking Big Sky Bigfoot tonight. Bigfoot sightings in Montana. We just had a sighting we talked about in Mineral County, a truck driver on Highway 90, and it just had your typical standard roadside sighting. Nothing really extravagant, but interesting nonetheless. And as you go into like the counties that have the high concentration of sightings, like Missoula County and Lewis and Clark, right? June 2018, a Class B sighting. And, I guess if you follow the BFRO classification, a sighting type A, Class A, is a visual encounter.
Right.
Where a Class B is ancillary, which means you have rock throwing. You don't really get a sighting of the creature, but you feel its presence and it makes itself known to you through vocalizations, rock throwing, or other types of interaction that's non-visual. Mm-hmm. And this one goes back to, some of my favorite behavior in the Lolo National Forest. And the reporter writes, my family and I have been camping out on the edge of the Lolo National Forest, the Rattlesnake Wilderness, for the past few weeks. During the past several nights, we have been having encounters with some sort of animal, which we first thought was a bear. However, during the daylight hours, we have been finding many young trees literally being broken, which we have numerous pictures of. We are camping in an area which is 9 miles up a dirt road near the Sheep Mountain trailhead. Several of the broken trees that we have been finding are very close to our campsite, while others are up and down the road. There has not been any strong winds in the area for well over a week, but yet these trees are broken several feet up from the ground, which, as anyone well knows, is not normal. We keep hearing something large and heavy walking through the brush, and rocks have been thrown at one of our tents. We are very much all in the belief that we are being visited by a Sasquatch. And there are 3 people total in their group, and they've not heard of any other sightings in the area, and it happens just after dark between 10:30 and 11 o'clock. What's interesting is these folks it seems like they're posting it, relatively soon, if not while it's still ongoing. Mm-hmm. So what do you make of that, gentlemen? What say ye?
I say extreme possibility.
Yeah, that's what I would say. It's a very interesting, a very interesting report. Even if nothing was seen, if there is something going on that cannot be explained by someone just screwing with them.
You often ask yourself that, and how do you know it's not somebody messing with you? Well, you rule out a lot of things. Remoteness. Why would somebody be, screwing around with you? And you can start eliminating those things. You start having a little bit more idea of what could and couldn't be out there creating this havoc. Tree snaps, nothing really impressive about that to me on the average. I mean, it's just, tree snapped. We haven't, I don't know. What's your guys' takes on tree twist? I really don't care that much about them because there's nothing there but some broken vegetation. But, the footfalls, heavy footfalls, brush breaking, that's something of size. Why could it not be a bear? I don't know,
Right.
Especially if they're camping and they do have they are, I'm assumingly carrying food and stuff with them. A bear could be a very real possibility, but the rock throwing's probably not going to be done by Yogi.
No, I agree. And, I brought up to you probably a couple months ago, there's a lot of the speculation on my behalf because I came across this personally with an unusual tree branch break. And this was a pretty sizable tree branch. What some people may not take into consideration is lightning strike. Lightning strikes can really screw up a tree and mess with branches itself. And of course, there's different intensity of lightning strike. You can have your main line of the lightning bolt itself, and then you have what I consider arteries that come off of it, which are not as intense, but they do damage to trees. And I came across it. I'm like, look, this is definitely a lightning strike. No, I think this is Bigfoot. And I'll leave the person, unnamed as to who I was having that conversation with. But I looked at it and I'm like, yeah, this is definitely. And you got to remember, every 10 seconds on the face of the earth, somewhere is being hit by lightning. And so, of course, forest lands get hit by lightning quite a bit. Now, I'm not explaining all this away. All of it is lightning strike, but you have to take into consideration that it's something that's not really thought about a whole lot, that maybe it is. Yeah, there's interesting, branch twists. I'll give you that. And, like you brought up earlier at the beginning of the show with grizzlies, they do back scratching on, pine trees and so forth. A, it feels good, and B, it's marking a territory. So, and you could have some compromised branches to that effect too.
It doesn't mean it's not a Bigfoot, but it doesn't at the same time, like
not at all.
At the same time, it could be many things breaking the trees, right? Guys, here's another one. This one's from Lewis and Clark County, another Class A sighting from September 2010, north of Helena, Montana. The other morning, I was letting our dogs out to go to the bathroom. It was quite early in the morning, and the sun was just coming over the mountain. I opened the back door and let the dogs do their morning business. About 50 feet from our back door was a large, hairy, man-like being. The dog saw it as well and came running back into the house. I stood still on the stairs watching it. I think I was in shock by what I saw. The animal then turned and looked right at me and let out this scream, holler. It was the most frightening thing I've ever encountered. The yell struck every nerve in my body. I was so scared that it instantly made me cry. I felt like I was getting this fight-or-flight response, and I've never been this scared in the woods. We get to see many different animals here in Montana, but nothing like this. The animal was about 7 to 8 feet tall and had brownish-black hair covering its body. The hair was probably 4 to 6 inches long. I would guess that it had to weigh in excess of 500 pounds. When it let out that yell scream at me, I got the feeling that it was angry that I saw it. The face was like that of an ape, but with very human features. I stood frozen to the stairs as it moved off down the hill. The experience probably lasted only a couple minutes. It walked on 2 legs, and it was no bear. Never have I been so scared by something in the woods that I have cried. I have come face to face with bear and elk and mountain lion. I was scared in those situations too, but not like this. When it let out that scream, what really touched me was it really touched the fear in me. I don't know that I'm able to do it justice to be able to tell you how I felt that way in the moment. As it turned when it walked away, I could see the muscles moving under the hair. It was well developed. I also think it might have been a girl because of the pecs or breasts on the chest. The face did not have hair on it and was blackish brown skin. It also had very human qualities to its face. It seemed very well developed. And I think when they say very well developed, it's talking about muscle definition.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because they allude to pecs or breasts. And, you know, it's clear that the face of the ape had very human features, which is interesting because, you know, again, we go into the thought is, you know, did you really see it or did the mind start putting things together? But, you know, this person says they had 2 minutes to observe this thing. 2 minutes, guys. And we did a 10-second experiment here at the, in, you know, the first part of the show. We're not going to do a 2-minute experiment because that would just be lunacy of 2 minutes of silence. But 2 minutes, you amplify that experience we did, or that experiment we did at the beginning of the show. You see exactly how, you know, how long that is.
It's a lot
duration.
of time. Right. It's a lot of time.
Yep.
Not that uncommon to get that much detail out of it, especially only being 50 feet from it. That's a relatively close sighting. 50 feet's not that far off.
No.
James,
No,
when you and
not
I
at
were
all.
measuring,
No.
when you and I were measuring the land for, there's this pipe in the middle of the land or whatever it is. James and I had to measure it, of course, for codes, because we have a project going on out there. That was 52 feet from the edge of where we were going to put the greenhouse to that pipe.
Yep.
So if you and your memory can correlate that, James, that's not that far away.
No, it's not. And the thing is you're looking at a 2 minute. You've got people that say, I saw this thing for blah, blah, blah seconds.
5
and
to 10
giving
seconds.
you extreme detail. And this person saw it for 2 full minutes and was able to like go, okay, all right, you know, absorb it. And I'm sure it took them a little bit to, you know, kind of flash back on what that was. You know, hey, okay, all right, I know what I think I saw, and let's rewind that in my head, you know. So there, you know, there's a little bit of your brain, you know, filling in the blanks, but still with 2 full minutes, you get a better description than you get these people that are like, well, I saw a flash in the shadows for 4 seconds. And,
Yeah. Well, this goes on a little bit, and he goes, a few weeks ago, a friend of ours was staying at our home. He was sleeping out on the couch in the living room. The windows were open because it was a warm night. He got to hear it yell, scream as well. It scared him so bad that he slept with a loaded gun by his side for the rest of the evening. He left early the next morning. We have been hearing this thing up here for years. We have been laughing and joking that it's a Bigfoot. Never did I think I was going to hear and see one so close. I know it was no bear, but a Bigfoot. I am sure of this as I am my own name. We get to hear it on a pretty regular basis. We have lived over here for about 6 years and have been hearing it all the time. We just never really knew what it was. Also, when this thing is in our area, our dogs will not go outside. The dogs have chased bears off the property. They've treated a mountain lion, but whatever this is, it scares the heck out of them. There have been a couple nights where we have had small rocks thrown at our tin roof of our home. We also get to hear what sounded like a small tree or log or limb being hit against another tree. I might add that the dogs will not go out during these time either. Whatever it has scared them enough at one time or another for them to not want to go near it. So it's interesting because when you start adding all those other properties in, I start to get a little skeptical. Either you've done a little bit of homework before you submitted this, or
or there's some fact behind it.
Or there's some facts behind it. Right now, you're not talking about anything. These, you know, the variety of this report's not that it is that outrageous where it's coming back to the house, it's attacking, and it's stealing meat out of your freezer like the Hanubi, Oklahoma, you know, the siege at Hanubi, Henry, that we've talked about in the past.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's rather mundane in comparison to that. However, you do have a close encounter, 50 feet. Able to see this, but now you also have repeated patterns. Now, it's interesting that they say that they're getting used to the sound of this thing. As I was on the Chestnut Ridge with David Drageson, he and I and his wife Cindy were driving up the mountain, and we got stopped by some folks who live out there, and they asked us what we were doing out that way. And, you know, Dave told them point blank what we were doing. And they're one of the first things out of their mouth to us is, "Oh yeah, we hear these things all the time out here." Like it's second nature to them, and they don't pay it any thought because they've conditioned themselves to get used to it. And it's very similar, I think, to what these people in Montana are experiencing. You know, they've been there 6 years. I'm sure the first couple times you hear it, you're like, what the hell's that? But then in your mind, you're starting to think, well, maybe it's some animal out there, or, tongue in cheek, that's the Bigfoot. And you don't really give it any credence until you see it in your backyard.
Right.
50 feet, close encounter, your dogs go ape shit. And now all of a sudden, you also have these other patterns of behavior that have happened over time. The rocks hitting the roof, you're hearing tree knocks.
The dog
It starts putting together.
Right.
And again, like it starts to put together a pattern of behavior we see in a lot of situations. Now, the problem is we've been documenting this so long, and I say this ad nauseum to the point every week, we make it easy to hoax Bigfoot sightings.
Right.
So you need to get boots on the ground out there, and you need to, see, BFRO does that. And I guess it's the reason why we're using the BFRO database is, one, it's available to the public. I'm sure there's other reports in their database that aren't public to people that, or maybe that not even been investigated yet. I know Pennsylvania has a hell of a backlog that's not been through, but nobody else is out there really documenting these things. And if you have an encounter, folks, we'd like to hear about it too. Always feel free to submit your report to us. Report your sighting or encounter. SasquatchExperience.com. We got a nice little form on there. We'll keep you anonymous if you'd like. We're not into all that. Not trying to expose you, just trying to get some data so we could talk about these things. Is what makes an interesting show, right? And if you don't want to email us, connect with us on social media. Sasquatch Experience on Facebook and Instagram. Squatch EXP on Twitter. Enough of those shameless plugs, and back to the Bigfoot.
Yes.
Well, guys, what are your? I've been talking now a lot, and that's what I do. What are you guys thinking about this?
There's one other case, and I don't mean to step on Henry and James's toes here. There's one other case that I find really fascinating, and it gives me the chills that comes out of Montana, and it's the Aaron Hedges case. It was presented by David Paulides on his Missing 411. And it took place in the Crazy Mountains in Montana. The Crazy Mountains are in the southern portion of the state, a little bit closer to Idaho, but not quite. But, the Crazy Mountains, it got its term in a couple of different ways of getting its term, but it is now known as either the Crazy Mountains or the Crazies. And that's how residents in the area refer to it. But Aaron Hedges, his entire case, he's an experienced hiker, outdoorsman, woodsman. He had everything tracked. He's out there with friends. He tells his friends he's going to this particular spot, and he vanished. I mean, he completely vanished. But what was discovered were his boots on a rock way off the trail, sitting next to each other side by side, as if somebody purposely placed them there. A series of months had gone by when his backpack was found with all the survival essentials still inside his backpack, but yet he was never discovered. And this happened over a period of time. And of course, the Rangers are out there and they're, scouring the area, looking in the river. They found nothing as a trace. And if anybody is unfamiliar with that, you can go to, the Missing 411. Just you can take a look at Aaron Hedges and his entire case. But within the Crazy Mountains, there's been so many reports of unusual creatures in the Crazies. And when I say unusual, I'm speaking in intents and purposes of a Bigfoot creature. But how many times in the past have we heard, without evidence of a Bigfoot, where clothing of the missing have been found folded or placed neatly off to the side? It's just, that's a creep show within itself. The way, the evidence of his things were found, it just leaves chills up my spine. And still to this day, it's still a missing case. And, there's people in that area that reside in that area that are very familiar with his case, and they're a little off put by it, and they've changed their behavior when they were to go out into the crazies, if they go out for a weekend camp trip, it totally changed their dynamics about how they conduct themselves when they're doing these type of outdoor trips. Or I don't know. It's an interesting case to take a look at.
You know, we didn't
So-
go into Montana in the missing series,
Right,
which is a shame. We missed it. Go ahead, James.
So in the cases of what you're saying is that we have clothes, we have shoes, we have backpacks moved and placed. Could it not be a show of an intelligence that says, "Hey, I'm going to put his shoes here because I'm 5 miles away, and this will draw a dog here"? You know, like, you know.
Well, you know, that's a good thought process, actually,
Right.
because in advance, I've never considered that before, really.
Right.
Maybe not just to throw it off the scent of the actual person, but you'd think even after it found it, though, and it could maintain a scent, it would still follow the scent.
Yeah.
Like it still wouldn't
But
just
the
stop
thing
at
is,
the boots.
with the boots that were discovered, they were discovered not by a search party, but by hikers. And they came across
interesting.
these boots that were placed on this rock,
Okay.
totally exposed. When they found the backpack, it was leaning up against a tree. Now, this was, I believe, a year later after he went missing. They find the backpack leaning up against a tree with
None of the survival gear
still inside
touched.
of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
all, you know,
That's
survival
unusual.
bars, food. Yeah, what is happening?
You'd think if it was a person, they would have taken the gear, or they would have taken the
course.
at least the survival food. If it was him, he probably would have taken it. Now you get into the if it was hypothermia. People in hypothermia do strange things, and yes, that's true. But to find the boots perfectly placed off the trail,
Right.
the backpack laid up against a tree, you know, those things start to get a little creepy. Because
Yeah.
to James's point, that shows something with a little intelligence. Rather, it's another
Intent.
person.
Yeah, there's intent behind that.
Yeah, like why would you just leave it there? I don't know.
It
And
could
not that-
even be a message.
Yeah, and
Like,
not that
hey,
you
this is the last.
try to paint this thing as a monster, but you know the potentiality for the danger is real. And is it something that we can rule out from the missing 411 scenarios? No, it's not. And though the concept of Bigfoot is still silly to many people, the reality to those of us that investigate this shit,
Right.
it's a real possibility and it's a potential. And don't throw it out. You know, why is law enforcement so eager to use psychics
Yeah.
and have no
Right.
problem in some instances using psychics, but then all of a sudden you
Right.
throw in the concept of a potential creature like a Bigfoot,
And all bets
it's,
are off.
it's
Yeah, no,
all
I
bets
get
are
it.
off, and it's silly.
Right.
I don't
You know,
understand that
back-
for the life of me.
Back to James's point, he brought up a point that I never thought of. Maybe that is the reason, you know, of an intelligence creature to try to throw the scent of or the location of this person off, just so that they're left alone,
Yeah.
and yet they've either have the person or have used it for whatever reason. But they'll put the boots 5 miles away over here in a very high visibility area. They'll put the backpack over here in a high visibility area. You know, I never thought of that.
So that
And
you
maybe it's
find
to
it and
throw
you
off
figure-
anybody looking for it. That's
Well, you know,
crazy.
they found Dennis Martin's shoes in the same kind of
right,
way, if I remember correctly,
Yeah.
off the beaten path, not by searchers, but by hikers. Like,
right,
so you draw correlations to those cases too. And you know, unfortunately, an hour is not nearly enough time to talk about all these things. And I think it's worth exploring more. You know, and do another episode. Maybe we continue this conversation, you know, just a little longer tonight because it's interesting. It really is that, you know, and there's more stories of the 411 in Montana. Isn't there a whole book coming out about Montana?
I'm unaware of that, but I hope there is.
I don't know, and this is where I get
It's
ahead
a
of myself.
beautiful state. Like I said, I've been through there a couple of times. You just want to slow down when you drive through there because it is absolutely it's just jaw-dropping gorgeous. It truly is. You cannot believe what it is that you're looking at around you. And yeah, it's very, you know, hospitable to creatures that you just
Missing
as
411
you drive
Montana.
through there, you just cannot. You know, that's awesome, fantastic, because we know or at least I know, going through the area. Now, I never saw anything like that because I wasn't looking for it, but I could see it being a very hospitable, environment for a creature like this to be in. And of course, it borders Canada and Idaho, and then the next thing you know, you're in the Pacific Northwest with Washington and Oregon. So it's all in the same region. Can't see why it wouldn't be.
Well, I think that's a good point to leave the show on tonight, guys. The mystery of the 411, that case we're talking about. And folks, I guess you can get a copy soon of Missing 411 Montana.
That's awesome.
I knew I saw that somewhere. I think that was the whole impetus of doing this episode, to be honest with you. I think that's what started it, because it's a state that we don't really talk about a lot.
Right.
Upcoming episodes, we're going to be taking a trip to Snowgrove Lake, a virtual trip. I wish we could really go there. We're going to be talking about that Sasquatch Legend Meets Science scenario up there. That's always going to be great for conversation. We're also going to go to Minnesota. Going to try to get our good friend Abe Del Rio to come on the program and do this with us. No promises. I'm going to try to get Abe on here to talk about Minnesota Bigfoot as we start, to continue to go through the season 5 farther north. Also, please pay attention to our social media. Not that we're asking for subscribers or anything like that, but because to stay up on the latest news, Sasquatch Experience on Facebook, Instagram, Squatch EXP. Some of us are starting new jobs and things are getting a little dicey. Some of us are traveling more than we have, so a live show may not always be practical, but we're always going to keep you informed of what's happening, whether we're posting an archive, we're going to post a pre-recorded show. Go on the website, SasquatchExperience.com, and go to our social sites again to stay up to date on what's going on. Anything else, gentlemen, that you'd like to finish off with tonight?
Yeah.
Well,
Minnesota, 74 sightings. Just that have been reported. Yeah.
What were you going to say, birthday boy?
I was just going to say it's interesting to end the show on a bit of a low note, on a bit of a down note, as far as with the missing thing.
Mm-hmm.
It is, but I think we're going to do that purposefully because, there deserves to be an answer to these missing cases. Rather it's we find a human culprit or something else. We have to understand that these are missing people, and these things are going without solve, and the case log keeps building up, and it's not getting any less apparent. It's still happening. So if we can draw attention to it in any platform we have, we owe it to these missing people to do that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks for listening tonight, folks, to Big Sky Bigfoot. Henry, give us your closing words, my friend.
Y'all be good or be good at it.
We'll see you next week.
You've been listening to the Sasquatch Experience. Please rate and review wherever this podcast is consumed. To share your experience, visit us on Facebook or email us, squatchexperience@gmail.com. Keep on squatching.